Imagine waking up one morning to breaking news. Entire governments have collapsed, economies are in freefall, and 6 major countries are on the brink of total destruction. It sounds like the plot of a dystopian movie, but according to a psychic who eerily predicted 9/11, this terrifying scenario could become reality in 2025. This isn't just some wild conspiracy. Many of the warning signs are already here. Political instability, financial crises, and rising global tensions are pushing these nations to the edge. Could we be heading toward an unprecedented global collapse? Stay with us as we reveal the 6 countries most at risk, the eerie predictions behind this prophecy, and what it all means for the rest of the world. Before we begin, if you're new here, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment below. I am prepared for any change. Let's dive in. The psychic's past predictions. Throughout history, a few individuals have claimed to possess an uncanny ability to foresee major world events, but very few have been as eerily accurate as this psychic. Before 2001, they reportedly warned of a catastrophic event on American soil, describing towers falling and an attack from the skies. At the time, these words were dismissed as vague speculation, until September 11th changed the world forever. After the tragic events unfolded, many revisited the prediction with shock, realizing that it had eerily aligned with reality. This wasn't the only time the psychic's visions came true. Over the years, they have allegedly foreseen major global financial crashes, unexpected political shifts, and even natural disasters that reshaped entire nations. Now, this same psychic has issued a terrifying new prophecy. In 2025, 6 major countries are at risk of total collapse. While the exact details remain cryptic, the warning suggests that economic ruin, political turmoil, and possibly even war could bring these nations to their breaking points. What's even more unsettling is that many of the warning signs are already visible: rising inflation, civil unrest, and deepening global conflicts. Could this be another case of history repeating itself? Or is this simply a coincidence? Let's take a closer look at the 6 countries most at risk. 1. The United States, a nation on the brink? For decades, the United States has been seen as a global superpower, leading in economic strength, military dominance, and technological advancements. However, beneath this image of stability, cracks have begun to form, and many believe 2025 could be the year that these fractures lead to total collapse. Political polarization has reached an all-time high, with deep divisions splitting the country into opposing factions. Protests, riots, and even calls for secession have intensified in recent years, raising concerns about whether the nation can hold itself together. Additionally, the increasing distrust in government institutions, media, and even the electoral process has fueled a growing sense of instability. If this internal discord continues to escalate, it could lead to a breakdown in leadership, creating a scenario where the nation finds itself ungovernable. Beyond politics, the United States faces serious economic challenges that could push it toward collapse. The national debt has soared past $30 trillion, with no clear solution in sight. Inflation has hit historic highs, making everyday necessities unaffordable for millions of Americans. The housing market is becoming unsustainable, student loan debt continues to cripple younger generations, and major corporations are laying off workers in droves. If a major financial crash were to occur in 2025, it could trigger mass unemployment, homelessness, and civil unrest. Historically, empires have crumbled under the weight of financial mismanagement, and some economists warn that the U.S. is heading in that very direction. Could an economic collapse be the catalyst that brings the country down? Another growing concern is the potential for external conflicts to escalate into full-scale war. With rising tensions between the U.S., China, and Russia, the world is on edge. The possibility of military engagement, whether through direct conflict or proxy wars, poses a significant threat to national stability. The U.S. has been involved in countless wars throughout modern history, but could the next one be the breaking point? If the country is drawn into a large-scale conflict while already struggling with internal issues, it may not have the strength to recover. Additionally, cyber attacks, supply chain disruptions, and energy crises could further weaken national security, leaving the country vulnerable to external threats. While the idea of the United States collapsing may seem unthinkable to some, history has shown that no empire lasts forever. The fall of Rome, the dissolution of the Soviet Union, and the collapse of once mighty civilizations all serve as warnings that power is never permanent. If the U.S. cannot address its political divisions, economic instability, and global tensions, it may find itself on the verge of a historic downfall. Will 2025 be the year that marks the beginning of the end, or will the nation find a way to defy the odds? Only time will tell, but the warning signs are impossible to ignore. 2. Russia, the weight of war and sanctions. Russia has long been a dominant force on the world stage, wielding its power through military strength, vast natural resources, and political influence. However, beneath this formidable exterior, the country faces mounting pressures that could push it toward collapse in 2025. The ongoing war in Ukraine has placed an enormous strain on Russia's economy, military, and global standing. What was initially expected to be a swift military operation has turned into a prolonged and costly conflict, draining national resources and weakening Russia's geopolitical influence. With increasing casualties, military setbacks, and growing internal dissent, the war has created a dangerous level of instability. If Russia cannot find a way to end the conflict or achieve a decisive victory, it could face catastrophic consequences that lead to its downfall. Beyond the battlefield, Russia is suffering from crippling economic sanctions imposed by Western nations. These sanctions have cut off Russia from vital trade, restricted its access to global financial systems, and severely impacted industries ranging from energy to technology. While the Russian government has tried to maintain economic stability through alternative trade alliances, the long-term effects of these sanctions are beginning to show. The Russian ruble has fluctuated unpredictably, inflation has surged, and essential goods have become harder to obtain. Additionally, with many foreign investors pulling out of the Russian market, the nation faces a financial crisis that could lead to widespread poverty and social unrest. If the economy continues to decline, the Russian government may struggle to maintain control over its citizens, and internal uprisings could threaten the nation's stability. Another major issue Russia faces is its internal political structure. For over 2 decades, President Vladimir Putin has maintained a firm grip on power, but his leadership is increasingly being challenged. Protests against the war, economic hardships, and corruption have sparked growing resistance among the Russian people. Many citizens are becoming disillusioned with the government, and cracks are forming within the Kremlin itself. If Putin were to lose his grip, either through political upheaval, internal betrayal, or even a sudden health crisis, it could create a power vacuum that destabilizes the entire country. Russia has a history of abrupt and dramatic governmental changes, from the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991 to past revolutions that reshaped the nation. Could 2025 be the year that Russia undergoes yet another massive transformation? Perhaps the greatest threat to Russia's survival is the possibility of fragmentation. The country spans 11 time zones and is home to various ethnic and regional groups with their own interests and grievances. If economic hardship, military failures, and political instability continue to escalate, separatist movements could gain momentum. Historically, when centralized power weakens in Russia, regions have attempted to break away. In the early 1990s, after the fall of the Soviet Union, multiple former Soviet republics declared independence, changing the global map forever. If a similar pattern were to emerge in 2025, Russia could fracture into smaller states, leading to a complete collapse of the nation as we know it. While Russia remains a powerful force, the pressures of war, sanctions, economic collapse, political turmoil, and potential fragmentation make its future uncertain. Will the country adapt and survive, or will 2025 mark the end of Russia as a unified nation? The world is watching closely, and only time will reveal whether this dire prophecy will come to pass. 3. China, the sleeping giant. Facing an uncertain future. For decades, China has been viewed as the rising global superpower, an economic powerhouse poised to surpass the United States. With its massive manufacturing industry, rapid technological advancements, and a government that enforces strict control, China seemed unstoppable. However, beneath its surface of economic dominance and political stability, serious cracks are beginning to form. Many experts now warn that 2025 could be the year China faces an unprecedented crisis, one that could lead to its collapse. The combination of an economic downturn, demographic decline, political instability, and rising tensions with the West may push the nation to its breaking point. One of the most significant challenges China faces is its faltering economy. For years, China's rapid economic growth was fueled by an aggressive real estate market, mass infrastructure projects, and a booming export industry. However, the real estate bubble has now burst, leaving millions of Chinese citizens with worthless properties and skyrocketing debt. Major property developers like Evergrande and Country Garden have collapsed under unsustainable debt, triggering financial instability that threatens to spread throughout the economy. At the same time, China's once thriving manufacturing sector is struggling due to global supply chain disruptions and increasing trade restrictions imposed by Western nations. As foreign companies seek alternative manufacturing hubs in countries like India and Vietnam, China is losing its economic grip on the world. If these trends continue, the country could face mass unemployment, economic stagnation, and widespread social unrest. Another major issue is China's worsening demographic crisis. For decades, the country enforced its infamous one-child policy, which has led to an aging population and a shrinking workforce. Now, with birth rates at record lows and a rapidly aging society, China is facing a population decline that threatens its economic future. Fewer young workers mean lower productivity, reduced consumer spending, and increased pressure on the government to support an aging population. This demographic time bomb could create an economic slowdown so severe that China might never recover. The Chinese government has tried to reverse this trend by encouraging families to have more children, but decades of strict population control have made cultural and financial barriers difficult to overcome. If China cannot find a way to solve its demographic crisis, it could face economic and social collapse in the coming years. Perhaps the greatest threat to China's stability is its growing tension with the rest of the world. The US and its allies have increasingly viewed China as a global competitor, imposing trade restrictions, sanctioning key industries, and strengthening military alliances in the Indo-Pacific region. At the same time, China's aggressive stance on Taiwan has escalated fears of a potential military conflict. If China were to engage in a war over Taiwan, it could lead to devastating economic sanctions, military losses, and potential global isolation. Furthermore, internal dissatisfaction within China is growing. Despite strict censorship and government control, protests have erupted over issues such as COVID-19 lockdowns, economic hardships, and human rights abuses. If internal unrest reaches a boiling point, the government may struggle to maintain its authoritarian grip. China's future remains uncertain. Will its government find a way to navigate the economic crisis, population decline, and rising tensions with the world? Or will 2025 mark the beginning of China's downfall? If history has taught us anything, it's that even the mightiest empires can crumble when faced with the perfect storm of challenges. The next few years will determine whether China remains a dominant force or becomes yet another cautionary tale of rapid rise and sudden collapse. The European Union, a union on the edge of collapse. The European Union, EU, was created as a symbol of unity, economic cooperation, and peace among European nations. For decades, it has stood as one of the most powerful economic and political alliances in the world, allowing free trade, movement, and collaboration among its member states. However, in recent years, the EU has been plagued by internal divisions, economic instability, and growing nationalist movements that threaten to tear it apart. Many experts fear that 2025 could be the year when the European Union collapses altogether, leaving behind economic chaos and political uncertainty. One of the biggest threats to the EU's survival is the economic crisis brewing across multiple member states. The Eurozone, the economic heart of the EU, has faced severe financial problems, with countries like Italy, Greece, and Spain struggling under enormous national debts. The energy crisis caused by the war in Ukraine has only made things worse, with skyrocketing costs for electricity and fuel-crippling industries and households. Inflation has hit record highs, and the economic disparity between stronger economies like Germany and weaker ones like Portugal has deepened. If these financial struggles continue, they could lead to a chain reaction where weaker economies collapse, dragging the entire EU down with them. The risk of a second financial crisis, worse than the one in 2008, could be the breaking point for the Union. Another major challenge is the rise of nationalist and anti-EU movements within member states. The United Kingdom's departure from the EU, Brexit, in 2020, set a precedent, showing that countries can and will choose to leave if they feel their sovereignty is threatened. Since then, nationalist parties in France, Italy, Hungary, and Poland have gained momentum, calling for their own exits from the EU. These parties argue that the EU imposes too many regulations, restricts national independence, and fails to protect local economies. If one or more major countries decide to follow the UK's path and leave the EU, it could trigger a domino effect, leading to the complete collapse of the Union. Could 2025 be the year when the EU ceases to exist as we know it? Political instability within the EU is also reaching dangerous levels. The European Parliament is deeply divided, with some nations pushing for more centralized control while others fight to retain their sovereignty. Disagreements over migration policies, financial aid, and foreign relations have made it increasingly difficult for EU leaders to make unified decisions. The war in Ukraine has further complicated matters, as some nations support aggressive action against Russia, while others prefer neutrality. Without strong leadership and a clear vision for the future, the EU could face an internal breakdown, making it impossible to function as a unified entity. The European Union was built on the idea of cooperation and unity, but its foundations are starting to crack. Economic struggles, nationalist movements, and political infighting could make 2025 the year when the EU finally falls apart. If that happens, it could send shockwaves through the global economy, leading to a new era of uncertainty in Europe. Will the EU find a way to survive these challenges, or is its downfall inevitable? Only time will tell, but the warning signs are growing stronger every day. 5. Argentina, a nation on the brink of economic and social collapse. Argentina, once one of the wealthiest countries in the world, has been struggling with economic crises for decades. A nation rich in natural resources, agricultural exports, and cultural heritage, Argentina should be thriving. Instead, it finds itself trapped in a cycle of hyperinflation, political instability, and social unrest. Experts now warn that 2025 could be the year Argentina finally collapses under the weight of its economic turmoil. With soaring inflation, a crumbling currency, and growing dissatisfaction among its people, Argentina's future has never been more uncertain. Could this be the final tipping point for a nation that has been on the edge for years? One of Argentina's most pressing issues is its uncontrolled inflation, which has reached catastrophic levels. In 2024, inflation soared above 200%, making the Argentine peso one of the weakest currencies in the world. The government has repeatedly tried to control inflation by printing more money, but this only fuels the crisis further. Citizens have lost faith in their own currency, turning to the US dollar or even cryptocurrencies to store their wealth. Savings are disappearing overnight, salaries are losing value within days, and basic necessities are becoming unaffordable for millions. If inflation continues at this rate, the country could enter a full-scale economic collapse, where the peso becomes virtually worthless and the government loses complete control over financial stability. In addition to its economic troubles, Argentina is suffering from deep political instability. Over the years, the country has swung between socialist and conservative governments, each promising to fix the economy but failing to provide long-term solutions. Corruption remains rampant, with politicians enriching themselves while the people suffer. In recent years, the rise of extreme political ideologies has further divided the nation, leading to mass protests, strikes, and even violent clashes. In 2023, a shocking assassination attempt against a high-profile political figure highlighted just how fragile Argentina's stability has become. If the government continues to lose the trust of its people, widespread unrest could break out, potentially leading to a complete governmental breakdown. Could 2025 be the year Argentina faces a full-blown revolution? Argentina's crisis is not just economic and political, it is also social. With poverty rates soaring, crime has become a daily reality for many citizens. Once affluent neighborhoods are now filled with desperate people struggling to survive. The black market is thriving as people turn to illegal trade just to put food on the table. Drug trafficking, organized crime, and corruption have infiltrated every aspect of society. At the same time, brain drain is accelerating. Many of Argentina's brightest minds are leaving the country, seeking stability and opportunities abroad. If this trend continues, Argentina could face a talent crisis, making it even harder to recover from its downward spiral. Argentina is at a crossroads. If its leaders fail to act, 2025 could be the year the country reaches the point of no return. Hyperinflation, political chaos, and social unrest are pushing Argentina closer to the edge of total collapse. Will the nation find a way to rebuild itself, or will it become a cautionary tale of economic and political failure? The coming year may be the most decisive in Argentina's modern history. 6. Pakistan, a nation on the verge of collapse. Pakistan, a country with immense geopolitical significance, is now facing one of the worst crises in its history. Once seen as a rising power in South Asia, Pakistan is now struggling under the weight of economic disaster, political chaos, and rising extremism. With a failing economy, severe energy shortages, growing separatist movements, and an unstable government, experts fear that 2025 could be the year when Pakistan finally collapses into an irreversible downward spiral. Could this nuclear-armed nation be heading toward total disintegration? One of Pakistan's most pressing challenges is its worsening economic crisis. The country is drowning in debt, with billions owed to international lenders, including the International Monetary Fund, IMF, and China. Inflation has soared beyond control, making everyday essentials like food, fuel, and medicine unaffordable for millions. The Pakistani rupee has lost much of its value, and foreign investors are fleeing due to the country's unpredictable policies. The government has tried to introduce economic reforms, but political instability has made it nearly impossible to implement them effectively. If the economy continues to decline, Pakistan may face mass poverty, business closures, and widespread unemployment, creating conditions ripe for social unrest. Could this be the breaking point that pushes the country toward total collapse? Political instability is another major factor driving Pakistan toward disaster. For decades, Pakistan's government has been caught in a cycle of corruption, military interference, and political infighting. The country has seen multiple military coups in its history, and even today, the military wields immense power behind the scenes. Political leaders frequently accuse each other of corruption, leading to frequent arrests, protests, and violent crackdowns. In recent years, the removal of former Prime Minister Imran Khan and his subsequent arrest sparked nationwide protests, deepening divisions within the country. With elections approaching in 2025, tensions are at an all-time high, and many fear that another military takeover or a civil war-like situation could erupt. If Pakistan's political leadership fails to stabilize the nation, could it become ungovernable? Pakistan is standing on a dangerous cliff. With its economy in free fall, its political system in chaos, and rising threats from terrorism and separatism, the country is facing an existential crisis. If the leadership fails to bring stability in 2025, Pakistan could become a failed state, triggering regional instability that affects not just South Asia, but the entire world. Will Pakistan find a way to reverse its downfall, or is its collapse inevitable? The answer may come sooner than we think. The future remains uncertain, but one thing is clear: these nations stand at a critical crossroads. Will they find a way to rebuild, or are they destined for collapse? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more eye-opening insights.